Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. Follow the link in the description to pre-order a copy of the book so you'll be the first to receive it on the date of September 1st, 2022. The Outdoor Minimalist Podcast has a goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. In episode 38 of the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast, we do a deep dive into a topic that I've been wanting to learn more about for quite some time, but I wasn't really sure where to look. We discuss solvent-based coatings. These are the waterproof and abrasion-resistant coatings that we apply to a lot of our outdoor textiles, from tents to backpacks, pants, jackets, and more. Solvent-based coatings have quite the impact environmentally and socially. And luckily, I had the pleasure of talking with someone that is working to help shift the industry away from toxic solvent-based coatings to a safer alternative. Gabriella Whittaker is a relatively new member of the outdoor industry professionally, but she has been an avid participant in the outdoors since before she could walk. She grew up skiing and climbing in the mountains of Washington and Idaho, and her time spent in nature fueled a passion for protecting these environments. Now she has found a space for her love of sustainability to make an impact on the outdoor industry through PolyCore Solutions. Thanks for joining me today, Gabriella. I am super interested to learn more about gear coatings. And this is a topic that I've been wanting to learn about for some time, but haven't really been able to navigate all of the information online and from other sources, so it's awesome that you're going to provide all of this for us. But before we discuss that, can you tell us more about how you got involved in the outdoor industry, outdoor recreation, and how that fits into your life today?
Hi, Meg. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, I've been involved in the outdoors my whole life. Ever since I was little, I grew up in Washington and Idaho, climbing and skiing in the mountains, and I'm still a big skier, ski mountaineer. Yeah, and then in college, I majored in environmental science. I've always been passionate about the environment and sustainability. And then I was lucky enough to join PolyCore, where I could kind of overlap my love for sustainability and the outdoor industry. And so that's where I am now, kind of trying to push the outdoor industry towards this new level of sustainability.
Awesome. And is PolyCore Solutions kind of your first role in the outdoor industry specifically?
Yeah, it is. I actually just recently graduated from college, so my role with PolyCore is my first role in the outdoor industry.
And what exactly is PolyCore Solutions?
So PolyCore is a sustainable textile supplier. So we provide high-performance recycled fabrics like recycled nylon and polyester, and then we coat them with our signature eco coating. So our goal is to eliminate the use of virgin materials and solvent-based coatings in the outdoor industry.
Yeah, I love that idea, and I think PolyCore Solutions is the first company that I've ever heard of that kind of has a replacement for other types of solvent-based coating, so that's really interesting. And what exactly is your role with them?
I am PolyCore's Director of Brand Management and Sustainability. So, like you said, an alternative to solvent-based coatings isn't something you hear of much, and it's not something that people know about. So my role with PolyCore is kind of being that translator to kind of explain to consumers like why this is important and the environmental impacts that solvent-based coatings have on our world.
Yeah, so you are the perfect person to be talking about this today. That's great. Adventuring plans on your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother-daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels as a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax and hemp, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. So let's talk about gear coatings in general then, and then we can kind of get to more about PolyCore Solutions and how they're kind of solving a lot of those problems. So what are the most commonly used coatings in the outdoor industry, and why do we use them?
Yeah, so gear coatings, or just coatings in general, are used to add some kind of element of water resistance, wind resistance or abrasion resistance to a fabric. So any piece of gear or clothing that you have that like falls into those categories, it's not going to be just the plain fabric. It also has a coating on it. So like a very commonly used coating is DWR coating, which makes fabric super water repellent. Another one is a PU coating, which also adds elements of water resistance and like durability. So these coatings just make fabrics super tough and water resistant, wind resistant, things like that.
And those would be kind of the coatings that we primarily would see on things like jackets and tents, or what types of materials are they usually applied to?
Yeah, so any kind of outerwear that needs water, wind resistance, so like rain gear, ski gear, snow gear, and then definitely backpacks or gear covers or tents, anything that, kind of needs to withstand the elements. Not so much on like your soft apparel items like base layers and things, but anything that is more exposed to the elements will have a coating on it.
And you already mentioned one of them that I think most of us will probably be familiar with, which is the DWR. Is that the most commonly used solvent-based coating, or are there other ones also out there?
DWR is extremely common, but oftentimes it's not the only coating. The DWR goes on the face of a fabric, and then a lot of the times there'll be a coating on the backside as well, because DWR just provides the water resistance. So if you also want to have it be more abrasion resistant and last longer and not, tear as easily, then you'll need another coating, which is often a PU coating.
Okay, and for listeners that aren't sure, what exactly does PU stand for in the PU coating?
It's a polyurethane coating.
And what is the reason that PolyCore Solutions came about? Because they're obviously trying to solve some type of issue and replace these solvent-based coatings. So why are solvent-based coatings bad? And what is their environmental impact?
The founder of PolyCore, my boss, Arthur Chen, he has been in the outdoor industry for decades, and he has always been part of the backpack manufacturing sector. And over his time working in the industry, he was exposed to all of the terrible environmental impacts that are caused by these solvent-based coatings. And he's a materials scientist. So after he retired from his career in the outdoor industry, he spent some time in the lab and found a way to have a PU coating that performs just as well as a solvent-based coating, but it's actually water-based, which is really important because the problem with solvent-based coatings is that when they're applied to a fabric, the application process releases what are called volatile organic compounds into the air. So these are known as VOCs. You might have heard of them before, but it's basically a general term for hazardous little particles that are released into the air. VOCs are what create smog, and they cause a lot of damage to the environment and to the ozone through air pollution. So as you can imagine, they're also really bad if you're inhaling them. And a really good way to portray the problem with solvents is actually through the story of paint. So until a couple of decades ago, the majority of paint was solvent-based. And so like when you opened up a can of paint, it had this really toxic smell, and after painting a room, you weren't supposed to go into it for a couple days because you have to let all of the VOCs dissipate. Now, the government realized the health effects of solvent-based paint, and they actually put regulations on it. So now, if you go to the store and buy paint to paint your house, they're all water-based because the government put regulations on solvent-based paints. But textile coatings, on the other hand, are still using the same toxic solvents that have been banned from paints because there's no regulations on textile coatings.
So is the most impactful time period during the production and when it's initially being applied? Because I do know for a lot of gear that we have coatings on that wears off over some time. So is it kind of like with synthetic fabrics that those shed microplastics? Are the solvents also shedding toxic things into the environment as we're wearing them because it's kind of wearing off, or how does that work?
Yeah, so as those coatings wear down, the VOCs are wearing off with them and going into the environment. So using a water-based coating would also eliminate that impact throughout the product's life.
Okay, and like you mentioned with the paint example, which I really loved, thank you for using that comparison. It made it easy for me to understand. There are a lot of impacts, it sounds like, on human health as well. So other than the environmental impact that it's having on the atmosphere during the production, what is the impact on the people that work in the factories applying these coatings and even developing the solvents? And even, is there an impact on the people that live near production centers as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who are working in the finishing mills, they have to wear a lot of protective gear to keep the VOCs from entering their eyes, their nose, their mouth, and even from touching their skin, but it's still not uncommon for them to come in contact, which definitely causes health issues. And for the surrounding communities, as I mentioned before, VOCs are like the main ingredient in ground level smog. So as these VOCs are being pumped out of the mills, it's creating terrible air qualities for surrounding communities, and it's really detrimental to people's health. And air pollution is actually the number one preventable cause of death. And it's just getting worse and worse these days, especially in the countries where, most of our things are produced. Air pollution is a huge, huge problem.
You already kind of mentioned that a lot of things are produced not in the United States, but where are most of these solvents being produced and then applied in the world?
It's primarily in Southeast Asia, so like Vietnam, Taiwan, China, those areas.
Kind of mentioned before that although there are regulations surrounding these solvents in paints, there isn't yet that with textiles. So are there we talk a lot about third-party certifications on the podcast. Are there any types of certifications that people or brands could have that would protect workers or communities and maybe prevent or offset any of those impacts, or is that just non-existent?
In my opinion, I don't think that there's a kind of a standard that's quite good enough yet. We're getting there for sure. Blue Sign has a really good list, restricted substances list, which limits what chemicals their partners can be using. And they are actually expanding that and talking about getting their partners to switch to more water-based coatings. So it's definitely in the works, but I would say as of now, there's not really a standard that covers at least the VOC emissions.
Because there isn't those standards or regulations for textiles, is PolyCore Solutions the only alternative / the best alternative to solvent-based coatings?
There have been other water-based coatings that have come to the market. The issue is that typically in the past, water-based coatings just don't really compare to the performance of solvent-based coatings. And so that is where PolyCore stands out, because our water-based coating truly does perform just as well, if not better, than a solvent-based coating. Like I said, my boss is a materials scientist who worked in the industry for decades, and he knows what the industry standards are, and he's always performing tests and things to prove that our coating does live up to the standards and has an extremely high abrasion resistance, water resistance, tear strength. So I would say in terms of being a high-performance water-based solvent, PolyCore is unique in that sense.
And I feel like I see this in the outdoor industry a lot with synthetic fibers versus natural fibers as well. We're often comparing them side by side. So it sounds like PolyCore has kind of done some of those tests, and you said that it performs just as well, if not better. So if you were to take, say, a tent that had the DWR coating, that's just some standard coating that most companies are using, and then the PolyCore Solutions water-based coating, would it last as long? Is it going to prevent water from coming in as well? Is it just as water resistant? Or how, through each of those categories, would you say it compares?
Yeah, we can basically match like the test results of any solvent-based coating depending on what the coating is used for. If it's used for a rain jacket, it needs to be super waterproof, or if it's used for a board bag, it needs to be super durable. But by manipulating the coating, yeah, we can match the test results of solvent-based coatings.
That's awesome. And that kind of relates directly to the next question are the applications just as wide? Can you use them for pretty much everything that we're using solvent-based coatings for, or are there limitations?
So the application process is the same and could hypothetically be done by any textile finishing mill that has the right equipment. The one thing that is very unfortunate about water-based coatings right now is that they aren't breathable. So it's something that our material scientists are hard at work on. But as of now, water-based coatings would be most suitable for gear like bags, backpacks, tents, and gear covers rather than like apparel-like items like a windbreaker that needs the breathability as well. So that's kind of the next step for water-based coatings.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that there's still kind of that development happening and going on. And we've already kind of mentioned that even with the solvent-based coatings, consumers often have to reapply them. So is that the same for the water-based?
No. One of our things that we really strive for is to have the products that have water-based coatings really like last your lifetime. So you would not need to be reapplying the coating.
So I'm going to kind of backtrack with my train of thought here for a second. You talked about the environmental impacts of the solvent-based coatings, but I am also curious about the impact overall of the water-based coating, because it doesn't really matter exactly what we are producing. If we're producing something, it has an impact. So you can compare it to the solvent-based if you want, or just talk about the general impact of the water-based coatings, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, there is still an impact. We're still using, textile finishing mills, which are using large amounts of energy and water. But it's hard because obviously there's no perfect environmental solution to manufacturing products, because like as long as we're still producing things, we're still harming the environment no matter how responsibly we think that we're doing it. It's something that I struggle with personally in my career. It's like, am I just encouraging companies to keep producing more shit that we don't need? But I do think that PolyCore's water-based coating is a big step for the industry, and it's the next step that needs to be taken. We kind of already have the recycled materials down, and the next thing to do is to focus on the coatings.
Yeah, it is definitely a difficult balance, and I've kind of struggled with that because I write a lot about gear in my career, and so sometimes in the back of my head I'm like, am I just contributing to unnecessary consumption and production? Like, it's hard. It is a hard balance to kind of fit in there. But I do agree that moving away from these toxic solvent-based coatings would be a really huge step. So kind of transitioning, how do you feel the industry can kind of start pushing towards using more water-based coatings, or even how can consumers start to push for that within the industry?
In my opinion, the biggest driver right now would actually come from the consumer. The fact is that companies and product manufacturers are pretty well aware of this issue, but there isn't really enough pressure coming from their consumers for them to put in the effort to make any change. And it's because of consumer desire and market trends that we've seen so many companies start using recycled fabrics. And so we want the same kind of shift to happen to phase out solvent-based coatings as well. Whether it's through PolyCore's eco-coating or different companies that are coming up with bio-based coatings and things like that, we really just want to see something change, and I do think that it'll come from the consumer. So just kind of like starting to have the conversation with your friends or email your favorite companies and ask what they're doing, like, what's your next step, or share some of PolyCore's informationals on Instagram. I try to put out a lot of content that's not really like company specific, but just spreading awareness around some of these issues.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of ways that consumers can start to reach out and maybe even encourage brands to start to shift and reevaluate the types of coatings that they do use on their products. But if a company wanted to approach a transition away from solvent-based coatings to a water-based coating that PolyCore uses, what would that kind of look like for them?
We go through kind of a long trial and error period where we have companies send us their current coated fabric, and then we basically try to match that coating with our water-based coating just to prove to them that we can, get all the test results that they're looking for and that we can make sure it has the same aesthetics as their previous coating so that they can see that switching to water-based coating doesn't mean that their product is going to have different performance or even a different look. So that's the first step, is kind of like nailing down the level of coating and the type of coating that they would want. And we're really open to kind of working with companies to find that perfect, unique coating for them. So yeah, if they just reach out to us and then we work one-on-one with them to find the right water-based coating for them.
Yeah, so it sounds like a really involved process on both ends, kind of.
It is.
Personalizing it, for lack of a better word, to the company's needs.
Yeah, it is. And it is a process. It takes quite a while because it's not just something where you can check a box and say, I want water-based coating. It takes effort from companies, which is one of the challenges that we run into. It's like all of these companies are so set in their ways and they have a solvent-based coating that works great for them. So why would they put in the effort to make the switch? So that's kind of been a roadblock for us. But we do have those companies who understand the issue and are taking the time to work with us and make the change, which is pretty inspiring.
Yeah, that's really great. And like you said, I mean, it does take pressure from both ends, maybe industry pressure, maybe pressure from the consumers, and perhaps even if they start to implement more regulations around textiles worldwide, that could potentially help, but I know that that is really hard to do.
Yeah, and I think the way that would happen is through the third parties like Blue Sign or other environmental certifications that products can get. Once they start implementing the need for non-toxic coatings, then I think that will be a good push for a lot of companies so that they can still get that environmental stamp of approval.
Yeah, so speaking of third-party certifications, if a company were to utilize the water-based solvent, is there some consumer-facing stamp of approval that would let them know, like, hey, this is a non-toxic solvent coating, or would we just have to kind of sift through the description of the materials?
It would basically just be like an extra little part of their description saying we use PolyCore water-based coating, and then part of my job is working with companies so that they can show their consumers. For every backpack we produce, we're eliminating 6 pounds of VOCs from entering the atmosphere. We can actually put a statistic on it. So that's kind of a nice little way of advertising that they're doing something environmentally beneficial, even though it's not part of a Blue Sign or a third-party environmental standard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, when you're reading through product descriptions, you'll often just see companies write, this is a Blue Sign fabric. So if we were also just looking for a PolyCore coating, then it would be just as easy. At least I think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that any company that does choose to use water-based coatings should definitely be, using that to their advantage to market to consumers and say, look, we're taking this extra step. We're PolyCore approved.
So you mentioned on your social media for PolyCore Solutions, you share a lot of information about solvent-based coatings and water-based coatings. So if listeners wanted to learn more about those topics, or even if a company wanted to contact PolyCore Solutions, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so our website, polycoresolutions.com, has all of the information about our coating and the fabrics that we offer. And then we also have a blog on there, which gives some really interesting descriptions, kind of dives deeper into some of the topics that I've covered. And then there's also information on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, where I make little informationals describing some of the things that we're doing. My email is on the website, or if you just message any of the social medias, I'm running those. So I'm happy to talk more with anyone who's interested.
Awesome. And I will share the links to all of your socials as well as the website. And I will probably share in the episode notes some of those blog posts. So if people just want to go and check out some snackable facts about
digestible facts.
Yes, digestible facts about solvent-based gear coatings and water-based gear coatings, then you can just jump down there and look at those. But with that, thank you for being here. I definitely learned a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can still find me on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book. Follow there for daily updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with a shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.